I'm going to talk to you about the Bible, and I guess I will talk to you about the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. That's about right in these 20 minutes or so, I think. Good topic. I think I can remember it. Okay, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. First of all, Christians call this the Old Testament. Of course, Jewish people, for Jews, this is the Pentateuch, the first part of their scripture. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. According to ancient tradition, the author of the Pentateuch was Moses. But the Pentateuch is full of contradictions, of doublets they're called, of verbal problems, that is, words that Moses could not have known, that is, words that originated later, many centuries even after Moses. And readers of the Bible realize this, of course, have realized this for a long time. During the 18th century, I think 1759, a German scholar, Hupfeld, I think was his name, was the first, though, to write about this problem, and he proposed a theory, according to which a theory which is called now the documentary hypothesis. The documentary hypothesis, which is a pretty good name after you know about these words. But the idea was that no, Moses did not write the Pentateuch, Penta 5. Tuch is a word, means scrolls, the old rolled up scrolls. No, Moses could not have written these. The idea gradually evolved, and I think it reached its final form in about 1870 or so, 1880, with Wellhausen, another German. So we see that the Germans dominated the field anyway, maybe still dominate the field of biblical studies. Anyway, the idea evolved that the Pentateuch evolved, that many authors, and not only authors but schools, were responsible for the Pentateuch. The general theory runs that there are 4 authors, we say the word authors, who wrote what is in the Pentateuch. But even the word authors will not do. First of all, the names. The J author, the Jaoist, the E author, the Elohist, the D author, the Deuteronomist, and the P author, the priestly writer. J-E-D-P. But having said that, we realize that these are not and could not have been 4 individual authors. One of them may be the first one, the Jaoist, the greatest of these authors, certainly. But generally, these are not 4 individual authors, but 4 schools. Because what happens in the Bible is, and this happens later in the prophetic literature, prophets like Jeremiah and Ezekiel and Isaiah, the great prophet lives, speaks, inspires people. Maybe he writes things down, maybe he never writes at all. After his death, his disciples, his followers, then try to remember everything that the great man said. They start to write things down. They pass these things on to the next generation, and a whole school then finally develops over 100 years, 200 years, always under the name of the great man, the prophet, and this is true also, I think, in the Pentateuch, but many other people have contributed to this. Okay, back to our Pentateuch and our documentary hypothesis. This is a brilliant idea, and although some people stubbornly disagree with it, no one has ever come up with a better idea to explain how the Pentateuch evolved and what the Pentateuch in fact is. The main thing to remember is that virtually every book in the Old Testament, and many books in the New Testament too, are the result of our composites. The good word is composite. A composite is something that is put together piece by piece from various sources. Every book in the Old Testament is composite. There is no book in the Old Testament that is the product of one man, one author. And certainly this is true of the Pentateuch, not the most important, not the most famous, the most important to Jews, to Jewish people, the most important books of Jewish scripture are, I suppose, the Pentateuch. But to Christians, this is not true at all. Other parts are certainly as important. Job is maybe more important. Isaiah may be more important. Anyway, back to the documentary hypothesis. The J author, now this is interesting, the J author is called J because he was the Jaoist. Now, Jaoist refers to Yahweh. We spell in English Y-A-H-W-E-H, Yahweh. Yahweh was the sacred name of God when God spoke to Moses in the burning bush in Exodus chapter 3, around verse 14. That's a key verse in the whole Bible, especially to the documentary hypothesis. In Exodus 3:14, God speaks to Moses in the burning bush, and he tells Moses at the time was living among the Midianites in the Sinai Peninsula, in the desert, tells Moses to go back to Egypt and lead his people, the Hebrews, as we will call them, lead them out of Egypt and lead them to the promised land, Canaan. Okay, and Moses said, what shall I call you? What shall I say? Who shall I say spoke to me? Who are you? What is your name, God? And Yahweh, God, answers basically, I am who am. That's our somewhat crude translation of it. But Yahweh, call me Yahweh, basically. Yahweh was the sacred name, became the sacred name of God to the Jews. Okay, now who is the Jaoist then? The Jaoist is an author who calls God Yahweh throughout the Pentateuch. No, I'm forgetting something, so wait, okay. The second author, notice too, we say the J author, but I'm saying that we spell Yahweh Y-A-H, but the Germans spell Yah, J-A, and this is a perfect example of the dominance by German scholars of Bible studies. The fact that we even call him J for Jaoist. Now, the Jaoist is the author of many of the most famous and the best stories in the Pentateuch. This means especially Genesis and Exodus, but especially Genesis. I can't go from memory into detail about this, but choose any of the stories, Cain and Abel, Noah, Cain and Abel, chapter maybe 6, Noah 6, Cain and Abel 4, that is Genesis 4, Genesis 6, Genesis, okay, other famous stories too, and then when Abraham appears, the Abraham stories, the best stories are likely to be by the Jaoist author. The second author is the E-author, the Elohist. He's the author who calls God Elohim, another name for God, Yahweh, Elohim, calls God Elohim, E-L-O-H-I-M, calls God this until God reveals himself as Yahweh in Exodus chapter 3, verse 14. This is very difficult, I'm sure, to explain, to understand in a lecture form, but if you write some notes, you can understand it. So, the four authors of the documentary hypothesis. The first author was the Jaoist, J, we call him. The J author. The second author, school, is E, the Elohist. The third author is the Deuteronomist, D. This is the author of a text that was found by King Josiah. Oh boy, I can't get into that, but he was a king of Judah after the kingdom of Israel split into the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. The southern kingdom was called Judah. The capital was Jerusalem. King Josiah, in about 630 BC, found, or his scholars found, a sacred text that was written apparently by the Deuteronomist. That's not so important. I'm sorry I mentioned that. What is important about the Deuteronomist? The Deuteronomist, as time goes by, has a very peculiar view of history, and it becomes very important later on. The Deuteronomist's view of history, and he says it over and over again, in Deuteronomy somewhat, but especially in 1 Kings and 2 Kings, his view is, if the people worship Yahweh, then everyone will be happy, they will prosper, they will be safe, they will be happy. If the people turn to other gods and chase after false gods, the Deuteronomist says, then God will punish them and terrible things will happen. Well, this is a very simple, simplistic, primitive view of life. But probably some Christians even still believe it, and some Jews too. The idea is, if I behave, if I'm a good person, then good things will happen to me, and if I'm a bad person, then bad things will happen to me. Well, most people would agree that experience isn't like that. Good things happen to bad people often enough. Bad things happen to good people often enough. In any case, this is the Deuteronomist's view, and the Deuteronomist is the author, of course, of Deuteronomy, the fifth book of the Pentateuch, of the Bible, and the Deuteronomist runs through many of the books after that. Joshua, Judges, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, 2 Kings, ending about 2 Kings. The fourth author is called the priestly author. Very interesting. Here, definitely a school of people, not a single author. The priestly authors were certainly priests, and they certainly wrote Numbers and Leviticus, all those rules that very brave readers read, but I think most people agree are very boring. Leviticus and Numbers are very boring, mostly, especially the rules about washing hands and eating this food and not this food, and washing at this time, and fasting at this time, and cutting the hair at this time, and all these little rules and rituals that are boring to most readers, the priestly author is responsible for. But The priestly author is also responsible for the first creation story at the beginning. In the beginning, God created the sun and the moon and the earth, and virtually the first 2 chapters of Genesis are by the priestly author. This is always surprising. Then I think the Jaoist contributes the second creation story, because notice there are 2 creation stories in Genesis chapters 1 and 2. And the fact that there are these 2 different versions right there in chapters 1 and 2 led many people to realize that no, Moses could not have written both of these. That's stupid. 2 authors were writing here. Anyway, that 4th author then is the priestly author. Now, I've spoken very fast, and I'm going to review some of the most important things I've said. We're talking about a theory of how the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, great literature in parts anyway. Certainly Genesis is great literature. Exodus is great literature too. And Deuteronomy has many good things too. How these got written. Again, the theory was, and conservatives still want to believe, conservative Americans especially, in my opinion, embarrassing, but is that so? Documentary hypothesis. Again, conservative, a word that you should know, conservative Bible readers and even some scholars, American, still want to believe that the Pentateuch was written by Moses. Written by is impossible. Writing when Moses was living in 1250 BC to about 1210 BC, impossible. But it is possible that Moses told some of these stories, and the stories were passed down orally, oral tradition passed on. This is possible, but even this is very unlikely. Moses, by the way, remember, is the hero, really the single hero of the Pentateuch. He first appears, of course, in Exodus, but he then dominates Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and he is the prophet of Judaism, of the Jewish people, a religious genius, to be sure, on the level of Mohammed and the Buddha and other great religious geniuses. Anyway, so the documentary hypothesis, again, suggests that 4 traditions are responsible for this Pentateuch, but many people were involved in writing these stories, passing them on, changing them, putting them together to form these composite works. To me, the key word is composite. Composite works, not by one man, not by one school even, but by various schools. Now, I think some people don't like this idea, but in my opinion, this is wonderful. The most wonderful thing about the Jewish tradition in the Old Testament, in my opinion, is that the Jewish people and the scholars allowed many diverse, even contradictory traditions to appear in the Old Testament, the Pentateuch and their scripture, side by side. Other people might not have allowed this, might have tried to eliminate contradictions, eliminate absurdities, stupid ideas, or terrible stories about terrible things. Many people, especially, my wife is one, can't stand to read the Old Testament because there are some terrible stories there, cruel. But those stories stand, and the Jewish people let them stand, and I think it's to their credit. In part, it's great literature. But today I have talked to you only about the Pentateuch, those first 5 books of the Old Testament. But you, as Korean students who want to know something, who want to know a lot even about America, about the Western world, about Western culture, would do very well to become familiar with the Bible, first on the level of stories, and later on the level of religious understanding. I'm not saying become Christians, I don't care. That's irrelevant, that's unimportant. But to understand the Bible, or at least not be ignorant of the Bible, I think is absolutely indispensable for foreign people, Koreans or others, who want to become familiar with American culture and Western people even.